How's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in the gay science, Nietzsche says something that on the face of it sounds a bit odd. What he says is that we have to learn to love. Now, that sounds a bit strange because we usually don't speak of love in this way. We think of love as something like immediate affection or romantic infatuation. But that doesn't seem to be Nietzsche's view. Love here, at least in this description of it, is more like a kind of discipline and a form of knowledge. It's not something easy and immediate. It's not a chemical reaction. Rather, it's more like something that we have to train ourselves into. It's something that takes time and patience and effort. Now, the specific example that he gives is a really instructive one. It's one of coming to love and appreciate the beauty of a different or foreign kind of song, an experience that I'm sure we've all struggled with. What I mean is that hearing a song we're not used to for the first time often strikes us as jarring or even repellent, right? But what Nietzsche is saying is that true love begins only when we're forced to confront not what we imagined, but what truly is. True love begins when we learn to stay with what we don't immediately understand. More specifically, and pretty much in his own words, this is what he says. He says, to really love this sort of song is, first of all, to stay with it long enough to get over whatever strangeness it may initially have for us. And then next, it's to listen very closely to all of its details and to discern and to isolate its parts. And finally, it's to put all of it together and to see and enjoy the beauty of the whole thing in such a way that we could ask for nothing better from the world. Now, I think Nietzsche would say that most things in life can and maybe should be approached in this way. And this is exactly why, for him, beauty is potentially everywhere, all around us. We just have to be patient and curious and dedicated enough to see it. In other words, we just have to be better lovers. Now, I realize that Nietzsche is not talking specifically about love between two people here, but I think what he's saying is nevertheless applicable. I mean, take, for example, the relationship that we find in the well-known fairy tale, Beauty and the Beast. So, of course, at first, Beauty is horrified by the Beast. After all, he's physically grotesque, he's socially strange, and, well, totally removed from the romantic ideal of a prince, right? If this was a typical romance, she might fall for somebody who charms her in the usual ways, but instead she finds herself in the company of an alien creature who speaks in a low, weird voice and whose presence seems, well, monstrous. And yet, here's the thing. She doesn't run away. No, she endures the strangeness, and she returns to him each day, and she talks to him, and she spends time with him. And what happens over time is that she begins to hear him and really see him for who he is. Not because he changes, but because she does. So Nietzsche might say here that Beauty, the princess, learns to love the Beast the way that we learn to love difficult music. At first, these sounds seem wrong. They seem dissonant and even monstrous. They offend us. But if we stay with them, if we listen closely, something else begins to appear. Depth and rhythm and eventually, hopefully, beauty. So notice that the Beast does not become Prince Charming by shedding his monstrosity. No, instead, Beauty learns to perceive the good qualities that were always there in him, but which her original ear for love could not hear, at least at first. I think that something like this is Nietzsche's point. True love is not just discovery, but it's a transformation of perception. In other words, the world does not become beautiful for us, No, with a little discipline and patience, we become capable of seeing the beauty that was there all along. And now that I think about it, another instructive example here is Cervantes' masterpiece, of course, Don Quixote. So we all remember Don Quixote, right? The seemingly crazy knight-errant who imagines windmills to be giants and imagines inns to be castles and peasant girls to be noble ladies. Now, let's focus on his sidekick, Sancho Panza. So the reason Sancho initially joins Don Quixote is not out of some shared belief, but simply because he hopes for a reward at the end. In other words, to Sancho, Quixote's world is pretty much absurd. But as the story unfolds, something absolutely incredible happens. What happens is that Sancho begins to see that there's something noble about Don Quixote, something truly lovable. And in fact, it's even much more than this. You see, at the end of the novel, Sancho actually wants to be part of the world that Don Quixote sees. He wants to continue to share in the magical and beautiful perception of the world that Don Quixote has. He realizes that he's had it wrong all along. The old knight wasn't really delusional. No, it was he, Sancho, who was too close-minded, and so for too long had failed to notice what was beautiful about the world. He failed to really hear the music. Until now, that is. Now he begins to appreciate the beauty of a song he once thought was just noise. Well, again, this is the kind of love Nietzsche's talking about. When we take the time to actively open ourselves up to and learn about and encourage those around us, what we discover often is a unique person with deep and inexhaustible riches and sources of beauty. But all this takes work on our part. That's the point. To see what's best in others, we have to be the best that we can be. And that means not sitting idle, expecting to be entertained and stimulated, but putting in the effort to see past the shallow and the utilitarian and to discover the infinity of deeper beauties in another. So again, for Nietzsche, that's the essence of love. It's the will to affirm. It's the capacity to embrace what's difficult and what's alien. And in learning to love, we shouldn't demand that the other become lovable. No, we should cultivate in ourselves a patient ear. In other words, the subtlety to hear the beautiful music and lovability already present but not yet accessible. And to some extent, we've all done this before, right? We've all learned to love people and ideas and even worlds that once seemed wrong because we've endured their strangeness long enough to realize their beauty and their truth. At the end of the day, I'd say that Nietzsche offers a pretty mature and transformational vision of love. It's not love as pedestal romanticism, but it's love as a kind of elevated realism. It's not passive love, but it's an active one. But first and foremost, it's a love that means becoming the kind of person who doesn't flee when the music gets hard to hear. Bye for now.